The sun had barely dipped below the horizon when Emily pulled into the driveway, her car engine wheezing its last tired breath. Her hands were sore from the double shift at the diner, her clothes still carrying the faint smell of coffee and grease. All she wanted was to get inside, kick off her shoes, and read her son his favorite bedtime story. But as she stepped out of the car, her heart stopped. A bright orange notice fluttered on the front door, catching the last of the evening light. Emily's chest tightened as she rushed up the steps, ripping it from the wood with shaking hands. Notice of eviction, you are required to vacate the premises. Her vision blurred. For a moment, the world went silent except for the pounding in her ears. This wasn't just any house, this was the home where her husband, Daniel, had spent his weekends laying the hardwood floors himself. Where their son had taken his first steps. Where laughter had once filled the kitchen. Emily sank onto the porch steps, clutching the paper. Her son's backpack lay by the door, a reminder that this house was more than bricks and wood. It was all they had left of Daniel. Her phone buzzed. It was her sister-in-law, leaving a voicemail. Emily, we've made our decision. Either you sign over the house so we can sell it, or you'll be out by the end of the month. Emily felt the tears burning her eyes but swallowed them down. She knew one thing with absolute certainty. She wasn't going to let them take this house. Not now. Not ever. The next morning, Emily drove to her in-laws' house, her stomach twisted in knots. The small brick house looked just as it had when she and Daniel used to visit on Sundays, bringing pie and letting their son play in the backyard. But today, it felt cold, like enemy territory. Her mother-in-law, Margaret, opened the door first. There was no smile, no warmth, just a tight-lipped expression. "Come in," she said flatly. Inside, the whole family sat around the dining table. Emily's brother-in-law, Rick, had a folder open in front of him, papers neatly stacked. He didn't even look up as she entered. Emily took a deep breath and said quietly, "I just got the eviction notice. Can we talk about this?" Rick finally looked at her and leaned back in his chair. "There's nothing to talk about. This house is part of Dad's estate, and we've decided to sell it. You can stay until the end of the month, but after that, it's over." Emily's hands curled into fists at her sides. "Daniel built that house. He wanted it for our son." Margaret crossed her arms. "We've already agreed on this as a family. You'll get your share of the money when it sells." "It's not about money." Emily's voice cracked. "It's about where my son sleeps. Where he feels safe. You can't just take that away." Rick smirked, the same smirk that had always driven Daniel crazy, and said, "You can leave quietly, or we can take this to court. But trust me, you don't want to make this ugly." Emily's heart pounded. She felt small, outnumbered, and powerless. But somewhere under the fear, something inside her hardened. She stood up, her voice steadier this time. "Then we'll see each other in court." Rick's smirk faded. For a moment, the room was silent except for the sound of Emily's keys jingling in her trembling hand. She walked out, her legs shaking, but a spark had been lit. She knew the fight ahead would be brutal, but she wasn't going to back down. That night, Emily sat at her kitchen table long after her son had fallen asleep, the eviction notice lying in front of her like a scar she couldn't ignore. She stared at it, exhausted, wondering how she could possibly fight a legal battle on a waitress's salary. A knock at the door startled her. When she opened it, Mr. Harris, her elderly neighbor, stood there with a flashlight in one hand and his dog's leash in the other. "You all right, Emily?" he asked, his voice gruff but kind. She hesitated, then nodded, but her eyes betrayed her. He glanced past her into the house, then back at her. "I saw you sitting out on the porch earlier. Something's wrong." For a moment, Emily wanted to deny it. She hated feeling like a burden. But the weight of the last 24 hours was too heavy, and the words spilled out. She told him about the in-laws, the eviction notice, and how they wanted to sell the house. When she finished, her voice broke. "I just don't know how to fight them." I don't have money for a lawyer. I don't have anything. Mr. Harris was quiet for a moment, then stepped closer and put a gentle hand on her shoulder. Emily, he said, this house isn't just yours, it's part of this neighborhood. We watched Daniel build it with his own 2 hands. We watched you 2 raise that little boy here. If they think they can just take it, they've got another thing coming. The next morning, Emily woke to find Mr. Harris knocking again, but this time, he wasn't alone. A few neighbors stood with him, holding coffee and notebooks. One of them, a woman Emily had only waved to in passing, stepped forward. I'm a paralegal, she said. I can help you figure out what paperwork you need. Another neighbor chimed in, and I know someone at the local news. People need to hear about this. Within days, a small fundraiser was set up. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers chipped in to help Emily cover legal costs. People she barely knew were dropping off meals, offering rides, and writing letters of support. For the first time since this nightmare began, Emily felt something she hadn't felt in weeks: hope. The courthouse smelled faintly of polished wood and paper, strangely calm, considering how fast Emily's heart was pounding. She sat on a hard bench, clutching a folder of documents her neighbors had helped her prepare. Her son sat beside Mr. Harris, swinging his legs nervously. Mom, he whispered, are we gonna lose the house? Emily squeezed his hand and smiled, even though her stomach was in knots. Not if I can help it, sweetheart. When they were called in, Emily felt her legs go weak, but she stood tall and walked into the courtroom. At the opposite table sat Rick and Margaret, her in-laws, looking calm and confident. Rick smirked at her, just as he had in their dining room, and Emily felt the same flash of anger that had carried her this far. Her lawyer, a kind young woman from a local legal aid group, presented the evidence: Daniel's will, mortgage statements, proof of every payment Emily had made on the house. Emily's hands were clammy as she listened, her breath catching when the lawyer said, this house was meant to be a safe home for Emily and her son, not a bargaining chip. Rick's lawyer countered with legal jargon, insisting that the family had a right to liquidate the property as part of the estate. Finally, the judge turned to Emily. Mrs. Carter, do you have anything you'd like to say? Emily's heart thudded in her chest. She stood up slowly, her voice trembling at first, then growing stronger with every word. This house is more than just property. My husband built it with his hands. Every wall, every floorboard, it's a piece of him. Taking it away wouldn't just leave me homeless, it would rip away the only stability my son has left. She swallowed hard, her eyes wet but steady. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for charity. I'm just asking to keep the home we built, the home my husband wanted for his family. The courtroom was silent. Even Rick's smirk had faded. The judge looked down at the papers, then back at Emily. Based on the evidence presented, he said, the court rules that the house remains in Mrs. Carter's possession. Emily's knees nearly gave out with relief. She covered her face with her hands as tears streamed down her cheeks. Mr. Harris gave her son a little nudge, and the boy ran to Emily, wrapping his arms around her waist. For the first time in weeks, Emily felt the crushing weight on her chest lift. They had won. That evening, Emily sat on the front porch, the late summer breeze carrying the scent of freshly cut grass. The courthouse papers, now stamped with the judge's ruling, rested on the table beside her. For the first time in weeks, she could actually breathe. Her son sat curled up next to her, drawing a picture of their house with crayons. I'm gonna put this on the fridge, he said proudly. So we never forget today. Emily smiled, her chest swelling with pride. That's a good idea, buddy. We'll never forget. A car door slammed across the street. Mr. Harris walked over, carrying a brown paper bag. Brought dinner, he said, setting it down. Some of the neighbors chipped in. We figured you deserve a night off. Emily's throat tightened as she looked past him. More neighbors were coming down the sidewalk, some carrying flowers, others bringing casseroles, and one neighbor holding a brand new welcome mat that read "Home Sweet Home." Emily stood up, speechless as people gathered around her yard. Someone started clapping. Soon, everyone was. "You didn't just fight for a house," Mr. Harris said softly. "You reminded all of us what community means." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said, her voice breaking. "You all gave me back more than a house, you gave me back my hope." Her son wrapped his arms around her waist, smiling up at her. "We're really staying here forever?" Emily knelt down, brushing the hair from his forehead. "Yes, sweetheart," she whispered. "This will always be our home." The porch light flicked on as the sun set, casting a warm golden glow over the gathering. Emily looked at the faces around her, neighbors, friends, even strangers who had become part of her story, and felt something shift inside her. The house wasn't just a building anymore. It was a symbol of resilience, of kindness, of people coming together when it mattered most. As the night settled in, Emily raised her glass of sweet tea and said with a smile, "To home, and to the people who make it worth fighting for." Everyone cheered. And for the first time since Daniel's passing, Emily felt not just safe, but truly at peace.